All right, welcome. Today we're diving into something that might sound a little technical, but I promise you it is one of the most critical skills in business, estimating working capital. Mastering this is just fundamental to keeping a company healthy and ready to grow. So let's jump right in. First things first, let's talk about a weird business mystery. It's this paradox that really sets the stage for why this whole topic is so important. Seriously, stop and think about that for a second. How is that even possible? The company is making sales, right? The profit and loss statement looks great. It shows a healthy profit. And then suddenly, bam, the lights go out. They can't pay their bills. They can't pay their employees. How on earth does that happen? And right there, that's the whole issue. You see, there is a huge difference between making a profit on paper and having actual cold, hard cash in the bank. That gap, that's where working capital lives. And if you mismanage it, that's exactly how a company that looks successful on the outside can just suddenly collapse. Okay, so if the big problem is this sort of invisible cash crunch, then the solution has to be looking ahead, right? It's all about foresight. And this is where we get into the real power of financial forecasting and why a good estimate is a company's best friend. You know, the source material for this really hits the nail on the head with this quote. Basically, what it's saying is you can't have a good plan, you can't manage your company well if you don't have a solid idea of how much cash you're going to need. It's the foundation for everything else. Think of it like this. Estimating your working capital, it's like having a financial crystal ball. It lets you peek into the future, see what your cash needs are going to be, and make sure you've always got enough gas in the tank to keep the business running smoothly. So, how do businesses actually do this? How do they predict the future? Well, it turns out there isn't just one magic formula. Let's break down the three main ways they do it. You can think of them as three different lenses for looking at the same problem. We're going to walk through three core methods. First, the sales ratio, second, the asset ratio, and third, the operating cycle. Each one gives you a slightly different angle, but they all have the same goal: get a clear picture of what's coming down the financial pipeline. First up is the sales ratio method. Now, this one is probably the most straightforward of the bunch. It works on a really simple idea. The more stuff you sell, the more cash you're going to need to fund those sales, to buy more inventory, cover shipping, all that good stuff. So the takeaway here, it's all about that direct link. If you think your sales are going to double next quarter, this method tells you to plan for your working capital needs to pretty much double too. It's a great, simple place to start. Okay, onto our second lens, the asset ratio method. This one changes the focus a bit. Instead of looking at sales, it looks at the overall size of the company, specifically its total assets, like buildings, machinery, and so on. And the logic here makes perfect sense, right? A huge company with factories all over the world is obviously going to have much higher daily running costs than a small local shop. This method just ties your cash needs directly to the scale of your entire operation. And finally, we have the most dynamic approach, the operating cycle method. Now, this one is all about time. It asks one really important question. From the moment you spend a dollar on raw materials, how long does it take for that same dollar to go through production, get sold to a customer, and come all the way back into your bank account as cash? And that's really the heart of it. If your cycle takes, say, 120 days, you've got to have enough cash on hand to cover all your expenses for 4 whole months before you see that money again. But if you can shorten that cycle, your cash works faster for you, and you don't need to keep as much of it lying around. So we've covered the how, the different methods for forecasting. But now let's talk about the what. When we say we're estimating working capital, what specific things are we actually trying to predict? When you get right down to it, it boils down to these three things. First, your cash and bank balance. That's the easy one, for paying immediate bills. Second, your inventories. This is basically cash that's tied up in stuff sitting on a shelf. And third, your receivables. That's money your customers owe you for sales you've already made. Nailing down what these three buckets will look like in the future, that's the whole game. All right, let's pull all these threads together. We've talked about the problem, the methods, and the components. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Look, at the end of the day, this isn't about having a flawless prediction of the future. Nobody's crystal ball is 100% accurate. The real point of all this estimating is to stop reacting to financial fires and start proactively planning for them. It's about building a solid, stable foundation so your business can not only survive, but actually thrive. And this leaves us with a really interesting final thought. We have all these formulas and ratios. That's the science, for sure.
But knowing which method to use and how to interpret the results based on your gut and your experience, well, that feels a lot more like art. So where do you think that line is drawn? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.